Welcome back to Mets Daily. I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live. Smash that thumbs up and subscribe below. Before we get into today's show, I want to start off the show a little bit differently today and giving a tribute to Larry Brooks. Unfortunately, the longtime New York Post columnist, hockey columnist, Hall of Fame hockey columnist, passed away due to cancer. And F cancer, man. It's taken way too many people. And we lost a great one. We lost an all-time great in the sports media business. Now, if you don't know about me and my story, I come here from the New York Post. I was at the Post for 5 years where I launched their sports podcast network. Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants, Knicks, Nets, a baseball show, and a New York Rangers show, which happened to end up being our most popular show. And I had the pleasure to have Larry on almost every week. You know, some weeks, every other week, every couple weeks. But for, 4 years, Larry Brooks was a staple on the Up in the Blue Seats podcast, and I got to know him a bit. And listen, we are completely different ages, completely different backgrounds, completely different lives. There were times in text he's short because, we're having him on a show where he's not getting paid extra to do it. He's doing it because it's part of the job, and, he knows that people enjoy hearing him on the show. And I got to say, the guy is so well respected by everybody in the industry, and his knowledge was off the charts to the point James Dolan said, hey, we went to Larry sometimes to ask him for advice. Like, there is a owner of an NHL team going to the columnists about what to do with the team. I mean, if that doesn't tell you how much of an icon the guy was, you think people are going to Mets beat writers to ask them what to do next? They were going to Larry. And he was an encyclopedia. He knew everything about the sport. And, having him on, we first had Ron Duguay. And it was cool to hear their back and forth stories because Larry was covering those teams in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, up till today. And, even a simple text like when he sent me, thank you, Jake, for the hard work you do on the podcast. Have a great summer. That got me emotional because, there's times where there were weeks he probably didn't want to come on and he came on. And, I'm not saying we were besties, but, that text meant a lot to me that he sent that. And, We had texted once, he wrote a column on the Mets, and I told him, I'm at a lot of the games, and, I'm in the suite sometimes, blah, 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 do the Mets podcast, and we talked about the Mets and what they should do, and I'll cherish those texts, and I'll cherish the conversation we had just on hockey with him, and when I co-hosted a show with him when we had Linda Cohn on, and Linda and Larry have been covering the sport so long, and just a great guy. Loved seeing his grandson play hockey. That was a big thing. There were times we had him on the show, and he was in the parking lot, and he was about to go see his grandson play hockey. So a true family man. He had lost his wife in 2020, I believe. Just a tough battle for him, and cancer just came and it got him quick. And prayers out to him, his family. Prayers out to Molly Walker, who was tutelage under him, and all the stories that she has working with him. I mean, they were tremendous. You had the savvy vet, and here this 24, 25-year-old young reporter covering the Rangers, the number one city in the world. So I'm thinking about Molly today. I'm going to shoot her a text in a bit. Wanted to give it a little bit of time, but I know I just used up 3 minutes, but Larry deserved that because he used up 4+ decades, 5 decades. I lost track covering the Rangers and covering the NHL. There's a reason he was the Hall of Fame. So rest in peace to Larry Brooks, passing away at 75 years old. Our thoughts and prayers are with you, your family. Our condolences. Shout out to you, Larry. All right, guys, let's get to the show. Again, I'm Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live. You're watching Mets Daily, and let's get to it. We'll start with Jeff McNeil, who there's some news with this. Jeff McNeil underwent thoracic outlet procedure. He's expected to be ready for spring training. Now, I have said on here many times, he cannot be on the Mets roster in spring training. They either have to trade him, cut him, whatever they need to do. I hope he's not a full participant in spring training because to me, I think that means that the Mets had a bad offseason. It's kind of out of the blue and a little bit alarming. Now, it affects pitchers more than it does hitters. So the recovery time should be 3 to 4 months. He will turn 34 in April. Remember, with this kind of injury, this is a guy who golfs a lot. And this is a guy who loves golf, who, he wasn't a Major League Baseball player, might have been on the PGA Tour in Jeff McNeil. And you combine golfing all the time and what that does on your elbow, combining with swinging, baseballs and playing second base. I don't know. Your hope is he recovers, and here's why. You're trying to trade Jeff McNeil. Are teams now not going to want Jeff McNeil because of the medicals? Like, he's got 1 year left. Do you want to trade for a guy that's coming off thoracic outlet procedure? I don't know. And that's scary, to be honest. That is not a great situation for the Mets in terms of trading him. And I'm worried now that they may not be able to. And if that's the case, they might just have to eat the $16 million. I don't think he should be any place on the Mets roster next year. I think they got to send him out or cut him and eat the $16 million. But, if they're in a position where they say, hey, we don't want to eat the $16 million, we'll have you on the roster and you can be a part-time player. I don't think that's good for the Mets team. I don't think it's good for the Mets clubhouse. So I'm fascinated to see what this injury means for Jeff McNeil and, if there's anybody that would take on half the contract and give the Mets a mid-level prospect. But that concerns me for sure. Report out there from Joel Sherman about the Mets reportedly, another player who, I think the Mets would benefit from trading that I thought would be impossible, and I still think is going to be difficult, is Brandon Nimmo. We're talking about the core here, and, I know what happened with Alonso yesterday and Scott Boras with all his alliterations, and it seems like he prepares it. We'll be talking about Alonso all offseason. I don't want to do Pete Alonso discussion every single day. It gets very old. The report that the Orioles might be interested. Remember with these reports and the relationship and Scott Boras, just remember that behind the scenes when we talk about Alonso and reports and their positive discussions. We don't need to hear that on November 13th. Just tell me, is there an offer or not? But Brandon Nimmo, the Mets reportedly spitball the idea of trading Nimmo. Now, it would have to include how much money they're going to eat. Brandon Nimmo has 5 years and $102 million plus left on his contract. A lot of that money's going to have to be eaten if you're trading him. Brandon Nimmo has had injury concerns. He's already moved from center to left. He had some injuries last year. Brandon Nimmo is on the path to being a full-time DH at some point in the next 2 years is my guess. And I think the Mets could benefit from Nimmo being on the team. It's not like he had a bad year last year. Brandon Nimmo still hit a career-high 25 homers, a career-high 92 RBIs. Now, his on-base was a career-low 324. He hit 262. But to me, Brandon Nimmo's injury concerns, defensive concerns, he only missed 7 games, but I think he's on a path where he is not going to last the whole season. Luckily, the last 4 years, he's played 151 or more games. Before that, he could never stay healthy. But I think now, going into his age 33 season, he'll be 33 in March, I think Nimmo's going to break down. And with 5 years left, if you can find somebody to trade for him, you have to consider it. Now, I would think the Mets might have to eat like $40 million. And if you end up having to eat Jeff McNeil's money and Brandon Nimmo, are you willing to eat $50 or $60 million? Listen, the Mets did it. They've done it with Verlander, Scherzer, Robinson, Cano. They've done it with players. Do they want to do it now with David Stearns, where they're trying to be a little bit smarter financially? That's the question. But if you're the Mets, if you can, to me, and I've said the core, move on from the core. That means not paying Alonso. That means trading McNeil. And if you can trade Brandon Nimmo, you do it. And I think that is a massive key to the future of the Mets' success, is moving on from this core. And you can disagree with me all you want. I tell it how it is here on Mets Daily. If they don't have to eat a significant dollar amount, remember, Brandon Nimmo has a no-trade clause, so it would depend on that. I think you got to consider it and moving on from all three of those guys. Speaking of no-trade clauses, Byron Buxton reportedly would reconsider waiving his no-trade clause. Remember, Byron Buxton, I believe it was over the All-Star break, said, I have a no-trade clause, I'm a Twin for life. Well, then the Twins traded their entire team, and they're going broke. So I think Byron Buxton 100% will reconsider. He might love it as much as he could there, but if you're going to be a 40 to 50 win team for the rest of your career, do you really want to rot in or irrelevancy like that? If I'm the Mets and he becomes available, you have to be all in for Byron Buxton. I mean, not all in. I'm not saying trade the farm. But Byron Buxton is making $15.1 million this year, next year, year after. $45 million over 3 years. If this guy is healthy, that is a bargain. I mean, that is an absolute bargain for a guy when he's on. He is on. I mean, in 126 games this year, he had 35 homers and 83 RBIs on a terrible Twins team. This is a guy with 162 game averages of 30 and 79. Now, he is not an all-world player, but he is an all-star. He is a good defensive center fielder and would clearly solve the Mets center field issue. And by the way, would do it for cheap. I mean, he's costing you less than what Jeff McNeil is going to make next year. So for that number, again, you're taking a risk because of the injury concerns. The Mets would have to be all over Byron Buxton. I would rather have Byron Buxton in a trade making that number than sign Cody Bellinger for $25 million a year. To me, I would rather have Buxton for that number. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Buxton will turn 32 in December, so he's not exactly a young buck, but he's coming off a year where he was fairly healthy. You know, he missed some time, but he still played 100. Listen, if you can get 126 games out of a year out of him and he's hitting 30 and 80 or 90, you'll take it. And what Byron Buxton is what the Mets are so desperately going to need, and everyone tells me in the comments, if you get rid of Pete Alonso, a right-handed hitter. Byron Buxton's a right-handed hitter. Cody Bellinger's not. Josh Naylor's not. Ketel Marte's a switch hitter. Byron Buxton's a right-handed hitter. And you tell me about the balance the Mets need in this lineup. Byron Buxton gives you that balance as a 30 to 35 to 40 homer guy. You know, if Byron Buxton's playing 162 games, he's going to hit you 40 home runs. So that is a name to monitor. You know, the Twins going broke, selling off pieces. I would think they'd consider selling off a piece that has $45 million remaining on his contract, right? You're watching Mets Daily. Let us know in the comments. Buxton, trade. Jeff McNeil, are you worried that this is going to hurt his trade value? And Brandon Nimmo, do you walk him to the airport if you could trade him? We'll see. All right, folks, let's go to your comments. I'm not going to be able to get through them all. There's a lot. Someone commented like 10 times on here, so I can't read every one of your comments. But we'll get to as many as we can. Here we go. Leo Isaac, let's go, Mets. LGM. No Clues says, first thing, Pete doesn't strike out 180 times a year, did it only once, and Cody strikes out a lot less, but he's not the answer to replace Pete. His offense is not consistent enough. You have to remember he played in Yankee Stadium. He's a lefty, and it helped him put up better numbers than he usually does. We gotta stop, like I keep saying at the ear. We can't think of, are they better than Alonso or not? That can't be your mentality. We know what Alonso is. He's going to hit more homers and drive in more runs than the other first baseman out there. I've never denied that. You have to think about the team as a whole, and too many people are short-sighted and just saying, no one, this guy, no. It's not about one position. If you're trading for Byron Buxton and signing Josh Naylor and you're getting rid of Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, your team just got better. If you don't understand that, I can't help you. So I get it. None of these guys are hitting more homers and RBIs than Pete Alonso. I understand that. But that's not what it's about. You just want a guy that could similar numbers, better defense, speed, younger, and multiple of these names are all of those things. Same with Deuce Custom. Why do you keep crapping on Pete Alonso? I feel like you don't like him. You keep trashing him. I'm not trashing him. It's not I dislike him. I don't like the obsession that fans have with him over the team. I'm not going to go to games next year if they don't sign him. The Mets won't win without him. That's what pisses me off from some of the fan base. And I understand if you want him back, but if your Mets fandom relies on Pete Alonso coming back, I'm sorry, you're brain dead. That's the reality. And I know that sounds harsh, but the Mets will go on without Pete. For the last 7 years, they haven't won shit with him here. So it's not about crapping on Pete. It's about moving the team in a winning direction. And if Pete comes back and they win and he's a part of it, fantastic. But for 7 years, they haven't. And I understand. It was the pitching last year. I watched the games just like you. But the reality is the overall team didn't win. And sometimes it's a culture thing. Sometimes it's a clubhouse thing. Mets do need leaders, despite you don't thinking that. The chemistry on that team was piss poor in 2025. There was none. Disregard the handshakes on the field, the selfies and the cameras. The chemistry, there was zero in 2025. The team was segregated into different cliques. It was not a unit like 2024. And Jose Iglesias, JD Martinez were a big reason for that in 2024, and Luis Severino. So you got to bring in the right clubhouse guys. And as much as people think Pete's the greatest clubhouse guy and he's that guy, maybe he's not. I feel like that doesn't cross anyone's brain, but over 7 years, the Mets haven't won, and the constants are McNeil, Alonso, and Nimmo. And honestly, if I'm the Mets, if I can move on from all three of them, I think you should have a field day if you're a Mets fan. We'll see how they replace him. A lot of work to do in the offseason. But it's not about crapping on him. It's about crapping on the Mets and the season that they had. Do you realize they just collapsed and missed the playoffs with a $340 million payroll? Unacceptable. Heads will roll, and players have to change. And I'm not going to do this debate every day, but I am responding to comments. We are getting you guys involved here. But, we got to be realistic about the New York Mets, too, not the New York Alonsos. NJ Builder, same on Alonso. We're going to get a lot of Alonso comments. I don't think you're being hard on Alonso at all. I think you haven't been hard enough on him. He's already the highest paid first baseman while not being the best first baseman, and he wants more. That's the opposite of a team player. And don't forget, Pete had multiple contract offers of 5+ years with the Mets, and Pete said no. He wants every last cent, and he thinks his home run record gives him a blank check, which is fine, but in turn, we should get the best player we can at every position, and Pete just doesn't cut it. He's a DH that will never have consistent success because strikeouts too much and doesn't hustle. I can say the spot at first base in New York City to someone who appreciates it. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think he doesn't hustle. I do think he hustles, so I disagree with that. But I do think, I guess it's a positive that Pete, or Boris at least, said yesterday that Pete would be open to DHing if a team wants him to DH some. Now, not the whole season, but some games Pete would be open to it. If that's the case, great. But yeah, I mean, the Mets made him the highest paid first baseman in the league, and he was nowhere near the best defensive. Now, he put up the homers and RBIs to make that money this year, for sure. But the Mets did that after he had the worst year of his life in 2024. And I know about the homer in Milwaukee, but look at Pete Alonso's regular season 2024. It was the worst year of his life. And the Mets still made him the highest paid first baseman. And you're right. Now, I don't know if it was multiple offers that he has got from the Mets, but he has that notorious 7-year deal that he turned down. His agent, Scott Boras, this is about money. And it's not all about home runs. And that's NJ Builder. I agree. It's not all about how many home runs you're going to be in the Bash Brothers. It's about overall team players, situational hitting, putting the ball in play. And the strikeout numbers and the defense was alarming and has been alarming. From JM Valentine, I'm rooting for Benj. We need to keep infusing some hungry young talent so we aren't spending on these immovable contracts. I was not a fan when we signed Nimmo for so long, and we cannot do the same with Alonso. This means we won't sign everyone, but in the long run, we'll be better off waiting until the bill becomes due for the Dodgers. I think they claim already reoccupied Ohtani's contract, but we'll see. Yeah, 100%. There's going to be a position or two that the Mets are going to have to go young and trust their young talent. I mean, that's the reason you don't always trade prospects, because eventually they play in the major leagues and they cost you $500,000 and they're basically free. And Carson Bench might be that guy. It could be a mix of Bench and Beatty. Those could be their two young guys at two positions. But you're going to have to play guys. The Yankees tried it with Jason Dominguez. They put Anthony Volpe out there every day. And yeah, it didn't always work. But you got to give it a try. You got to give them the games. You can't have all these prospects and never start them. And I think Benj, again, that's 1 year in the minors. I think it's still too soon. But 100%, you can't. I think a lot of fans expect, because Steve Cohen's the owner now, that you can give 9-figure contracts to every player. You can't do it. You gave it to Lindor. You gave it to Nimmo. You gave it to Soto. You can't do it at every position. Ketel Marte's intriguing because he's not a 9-figure guy. He's an 8-figure guy. Josh Naylor's intriguing because there's a chance you can maybe get him for under 9 figures. Carson Bench is intriguing because he's free. So you have to brainstorm about ways to get better at positions, because you also need to pay starting pitchers. If you're all talking about Scooble next offseason, sign him. Great. That's going to cost you $400 million. You don't have unlimited money, and players aren't coming to New York for deferred money. New York is expensive, and I've spoken about this. You're already getting screwed in taxes on these contracts. In LA, you could do it because you're going to win a World Series and you're going to make money from winning. So it's not all about, we'll defer all the money. That doesn't always work, and players don't always want to do that. Ohtani did that because he makes as much in endorsements as he does on the Dodgers. Pete Alonso isn't making billions of dollars in endorsements. So, that you got to factor that in as well, guys. Addicted to JB. I don't know if that's me, JB, or Justin Bieber. You and I clearly saw a different Diaz this season. Lost his role, put the Phantom IL, had several horrible stretches. We don't need Diaz. Diaz needs us. I mean, Diaz had a 1.63 ERA. What were you watching? He's the best closer in baseball. What are we talking about here? From XX Nike Elite Gaming, the Mets dugout seems segregated in 2025. Chemistry was gone. Marte was always giddy and happy, even when losing, as long as Soto was doing good. 100%. I think there was. And listen, Marte's not going to be back. Soto's here, so that's that. But you're not bringing Marte back to be a vibes guy. You can't have vibes guy on the team. Jose Siri, Starling, Marte were vibes guys. They weren't Major League Baseball players. Now, Marte had a solid season, but he was a singles hitter. He was a part-time DH that was a singles hitter. The Mets need more than that. They need guys that could actually play positions, play them effectively, steal bases, drive in runs, hit home runs, extra base hits. They need that. And Marte wasn't that, and Siri obviously was a lost cause, although I loved the trade at the time. It didn't work. So 100%. I mean, if you didn't see that this clubhouse, this dugout was separated, you really weren't watching Mets baseball. Nezzy765 says LGM, Diaz is a must, 100%. Need Diaz. There's reports that the closer market might be moving. Maybe by tomorrow we hear about one or two of these closers signing. Maybe we hear about Diaz. So we'll see. A lot of comments from Putting on Air 726. Listen, I appreciate that. I can't read every one of your comments. I'll read one of them here. Alonso is part of the identity, especially from a fan's perspective. I don't want a team of 25 mercenaries. You need homegrown talent that gets the fans to the park, and then you add players to that nucleus. The problem is Stearns doesn't pay for high-end pitching, while the Dodgers, the Yankees, and Phillies do. Stearns, roster, Mendoza group, they made the bad decision. Well, here's the thing. You want that high-end pitching? You're not paying Alonso in high-end pitching. You can't have everything you want, and Alonso's one of the things you're probably not going to be able to have that you want if you want to talk about a guy like Skubal and high-end pitching. You can't have both ends of the spectrum. And listen, Nimmo's a homegrown guy, and everyone's trying to ship him out of town. And he didn't put up bad numbers. All right, guys, you're watching Mets Daily. Smash that thumbs up, comment below, and follow me at Jake Brown Live. Thanks for watching. R.I.P. to Larry Brooks. We'll talk to you tomorrow.